Hello, and welcome to uh, another casual conversation with Kyle. That would be me. And you are here at Augustinus Vox, and I thought had some time, and it would be good to work up another video where we talk through more of our website, except this time we're going to take a little bit different track. First, we covered the home screen. In the last video, this one we're going to cover the music page and talk a little bit about the musical journey that we've been on here with the Augustinus Vox project. So I'm going to pull up this website, and you can see here that we are on the music page. So I have, progressed from the home page to the music page, and we have a list of all the albums that have we've worked on, and all the way to the very first album down here, Against the Skeptics, released in uh, June of last year, and so we're going to talk through the albums and try to make this as brief as I can because I tend to be very wordy, and I've had at least two versions of this video that were significantly long, and thought probably need to try to find a way to make it a little shorter. But here we have uh, the music page, and one of the things that I start off by saying here is really where the music is located, where you as the listener can find and listen to the music. And we're really on all the major streaming platforms. I use a distributor referred to as DistroKid, and that distributor, pretty affordable. You just pay, you know, $50 or $80. They have different plans, but you you get it. You get the album music pushed out to all these platforms all at once. It doesn't necessarily arrive at every platform at the same time. You can plan ahead and make that happen, but we have all the major ones: YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon. So the music is available there. You can find it there if you listen and use one of those streaming platforms. You can also find the music on Suno, and Suno is the platform where I create the music. It's an AI tool that's also a music service, and there's a lot of creators there, individuals like myself, people that create AI music using Suno. And I do have a profile there on Suno, and you can see here on my screen. So I go by J Groovy at J Groovy, and I call myself J Groove. There's a story behind that. I'll share more history later. Don't want to get into it, but I have Augustinus Vox albums and also a lot of other music there. Um, and so this is my profile, and you can go and check it out as you want to, and see all the silly projects that I work on. So let's go down to the very bottom and work our way up to the top. So we're gonna start with if we're gonna start, and I'm gonna give a little introduction about where Augustine starts. Okay, so if you are looking at Augustine's life or his writings particularly, and you ask what is the earliest writing from Augustine that exists today that we can read, and what you'll find out is most people say that that work is called Against the Skeptics, or Contra Academicos is the Latin uh, phrase for the work. And this work was written in 386 AD. And to give you some context, if if you think about, if you're familiar with the Confessions, right? Augustine in the Confessions details this time in his life where he had a very significant conversion experience, where he picked up the letters. He was with a friend in a garden, picked up the letter of Paul after he heard a voice that said, "Take up and read," or "Pick up and read." And he picks up this book. He reads this passage of the Bible, has this uh, very moving experience where he's crying. He's crying out to God. His friend and him both essentially dedicate their lives to God. They are in, at that time, the city of Milan, and shortly after that, he, his mother, his son, and a group of friends take a retreat. And so now they're in the countryside, 386, in the countryside, and they are there together for a time of spiritual retreat and philosophical retreat. So they are exploring topics of philosophy, exploring works of ancient writers, and and having dialogues and discussions. And the first work from Augustine that we have is, in fact, a dialogue where an individual, a stenographer, recorded a conversation that Augustine and his friends have, a debate that they have about the nature of truth, about the nature of skepticism, and you know, about doubt and reason, and it's a great work. And we tried to work this into an album, uh, and we call it Against the Skeptics, and it's more of a introspective kind of journey of an individual working through, the work has 3 books, and it kind of has a progression as you move through it, and we tried to follow that progression in the album as much as possible, using the AI tool to help us to learn about the work, use the AI tool to help us come up with the lyrics. We have an AI tool that makes the music. We listen to it, we reflect on it. That's kind of how we work through the albums and the works. And so you'll see that as you listen to the album, you'll kind of hear a progression, someone moving from really doubt to uh, truth, affirming truth. And one of the significant parts of the album is that moment when there's a song, I think therefore I am, and it's sort of a modern take on a philosopher Descartes. But Augustine had talked about the idea too in the past, long before Descartes, and so he says, I know that I exist. Therefore, we know we can know truth, and really follows that journey. And great album. And we do have the books that I audiobooks on the YouTube, so you can actually listen to the work and experience it through a translation, modern translation, essentially AI assisted translation, because I don't know Latin, so I have an AI. The AI assist me in translating the works from Latin, and we have those on the YouTube. You can listen to them, and so as if you enjoy the album, you want to dig a little further, you can listen to that. If you want to dig even further than that, I would encourage you, find some scholarly translations and you other works by actual scholars, not Kyle the Hack, but you can learn from people who really know about these things. And so, but this is really a starting point, and from there we went to the next dialogue, which is called On the Happy Life. And this is a very short work. It's just one single book in the ancient world, so you can read it in about 30, 40 minutes. Listen to it. Not very long at all, and it's really about it's another dialogue where they're discussing and they're exploring the concept of happiness and where does happiness come from. What is joy? What is happiness? What is it? What is true? Where does true joy come from? And where is it found? Where's its source? And so he has it says here, seeking true joy, wisdom, and the light that never fades. Of course, they conclude true joy is found in God. And so the album appropriately and the work ends with essentially worship of God through a song, a hymn. And one of the unique things about this album and that hymn as well is it features Augustine's mom very prominently. His mom's name was Monica, and she was a part of these discussions. Features fairly prominently, and it's neat when you listen to these dialogues too. It's also really kind of the mundane of life, right? Sometimes people even like don't want what they said recorded, and but great to listen to. And this album has a special significance for me personally because it was after I had finished it, but I hadn't published it, that I had found out that a friend of mine had unexpectedly passed away at the age of 42, and that was especially hard to hear. This is a close friend of mine, and one of my college buddies. We had a group, um, and a group of us, and um, we walked through that grief together and that news. Um, and this album took a very different, um, had a very different significance for me after I got that news. Two songs in particular sort of emerged as, um, for me, powerful reminders of my friendship. And there was the Feast of Words, and we sat and laughed. And so those talk about joy being found in community with others. That God has blessed us with friends and family, and we have the opportunity to spend time together, to have conversations, to speak with one another, enjoy a meal together, and those are just great songs. Uh, and so it was around that time that I decided to, kind of get off my seat and publish it. So I did, and um, uh, really showed me also just how, even though the music is AI generated, and it is still very impactful and moving and human. And it's drawn from a human. I'm a human listening to it, so you got a human on both ends of it, even though you got AI tools in between. And I know there's a lot of debate about this, but I thought I'd throw my 2 cents in there at least. And uh, really showed me how this music can be helpful. Uh, it, I had experienced that in terms of intellectually working through the Against the Skeptics album, but then also I think in many ways emotionally too, as I was working through that news and listening to this album. And from there, I was searching for, as I was processing the grief of that loss, searching for essentially uh, eulogies, ancient eulogies. What did Augustine say about death? And I knew there were other ancient writers I could look at as well, and found this work by Saint Ambrose, who was a contemporary of Augustine, and I knew that Augustine and Ambrose had a connection. And this is a takes place earlier, not 386. We're in 379, and what happens is Ambrose had two siblings and his brother. He had a sister and a brother, and his brother died. Uh, and it was a very difficult time for Ambrose. He was, in charge of a church. His brother was part of that church. Brother passed away unexpectedly at a fairly young age as well, and he, you know, writes this eulogy, also preaches a sermon, but it deals with topics of grief and loss, with also with gratitude and thankfulness for the life that God gave, for the companionship that God had provided, and also the hope of what we expect in the future, um, the resurrection, the hope of the resurrection, and new life um, with God. And so that album touches on those themes, and hope that is helpful to anyone who has similarly experienced that kind of loss. From there, we dove back into philosophical works of Augustine, and the next one that comes up is a work called De Ord- Ordine, or On Order, and it's really dealing with the topic of you know essentially God's providence, uh, sort of like, there's all this. seemingly chaos out there in the world or the universe, and but really it's just chaos that's not under that where a pattern's not understood. And then we do see visible patterns in the universe and in nature and life, and those things point us to a higher reality. The pattern maker. Patterns point to a pattern maker. And chaos, uh, you know, is not so random. Um, and there's a great song on this album called "The Order of Love." Uh, so it talks about love coming from God, and working in us, and how love is from God and points to God. And I especially like that song, um, and about how there is even an order to love itself, and a proper order to love that God has intended, and really points the way towards as it says here, points this soul towards wisdom and love, so that that when we recognize the one who made all this and his providential care for everything, it moves us in ways, moves us intellectually, moves us in our hearts. And so that's On Order, and a great album. And I went from there to make an EP, and the EP was called The Order of Love EP, of course, appropriately named. And this, I like those albums where folks will, like, have a song that's especially meaningful, and then they'll have an instrumental version of it, and you can do like karaoke, or you can work with it. I don't know if many of you listen to any, like, if you're into any anime, and you've seen some of those albums where they a lot of times they'll have the theme song, and then they'll make an instrumental version too, and it's kind of trying to echo some of that. But also another version of the song, I made a glam metal version, a metal version. So I have two versions of the song and instrumentals that you can listen to, and just neat to kind of experience the music that way. So it's kind of like experimenting with metal rock a little bit, and also experimenting with instrumentals. And from there, I moved into Augustine's work, Soliloquies, and this is where we have our Restless Heart song that came out of that work, and also two of our first instrumental tracks that we did. And Soliloquies is a great work. It's sort of like a prayer. It feels a lot like Confessions when you're reading it, like a very early Confessions, and has a lot of praying in it. Augustine's saying he wants to know God and the soul, and it talks about a lot of longing and search for truth, and he's thinking about the soul. It's almost like a precursor to some later philosophical works as well. And it's two books. It's a bit longer, but a good one, and definitely worth. It was really a great album in many ways, and just really enjoyed working through these topics in this album. And from there, we went to the Letters album, Cassiciacum Letters. So I knew that Augustine also wrote a lot of correspondences. He corresponded with friends all the time, and there were a few letters that he wrote during this time when he was in the countryside at Cassiciacum. And so I did some research and found a couple of these letters that he wrote. In fact, actually, Against the Skeptics starts as a letter to his friend, or Romanianus. But here he has some letters he writes to some individuals, and I wanted to capture those in the song. And so there's one about friendship. There's one about um, the search for blessedness, because his friend gives him a compliment, and he's like, it's like kind of goes on it, kind of gets fixated on that, and also just truth. There's an album, or a letter, sorry, where he's like talking about Against the Skeptics. His friend had read it, and he's giving him some more information about why he wrote it, what prompted it, and what he really thinks he did there. And you find out, one of the interesting things you find out is he's he's not saying he's destroying skepticism. He's saying skepticism is really a tool that God has provided us as we journey towards understanding of truth. That skepticism actually helps us to. It's not where we're supposed to stay. It's more of a journey. It helps us to identify incorrect things and to question and to search. And so uh, that's Kasikiakam letters, and definitely check it out. It's only a couple songs, and then from there we went into we know that Augustine is moving from the countryside back to the city, and he's doing that because he's going to get baptized. He's going to go through an intensive period of instruction in baptism at Ambrose's church and from Ambrose himself. And so we wanted to capture the journey. It's even briefly mentioned, I believe, in the Confessions. There's even a funny anecdote where he talks about how his friend Alypius was so, during the winter, his friend Alypius was so like kind of on fire for Jesus that he like took off his shoes and started walking on the ground with his bare feet on the icy countryside. This is sort of a funny little anecdote that he throws in there, and we wanted to capture the journey, and kind of pictured it as a slow, 3-day journey from the countryside to back to Milan. You can actually do it a lot quicker than that, like if you're on a horseback. But there's a city in the ancient world that was found out that was kind of halfway between. So kind of picture them going there and staying a day and then moving on to the city, and that anticipation growing of what's ahead. So we get to Milan, and now we are in another philosophical work of Augustine called On the Immortality of the Soul. And this is one where Augustine actually mentions it as an old man. He goes back to revisit it, and he's like, I don't understand what I wrote, and it just makes me tired, and I want to go to sleep. And if you try to pick it up, it's real short, but it's dense and compact. He also complains about the fact that somebody like published it without his permission. He like loaned it out to somebody, and I guess they like went and published it. He was like, didn't really. It was like my own thoughts, And but this is a good album. We really try to transform this, make this a lot more accessible. The arguments accessible. Really talking about the immortality of the soul, like what makes our soul immortal. And so, if you ever been a person that's been in maybe conversations, religious philosophical conversations with somebody who maybe has this idea that the human soul is not immortal. Some people have that opinion, and this is a work that is a good one for those conversations to work through. So he kind of talks about all the different ways that he understands that point to the immortality of the soul, and it's really it's also a Platonic kind of idea understanding. But one of the neat things about this album that we did is that we made our first simulated live song. So at the end, you got this fun little romp rendition of a song called "Carried by the Light," where you get to kind of experience what a live Augustinus Vox show could be like. And someday, maybe, we got the robots coming, maybe robot musicians. Maybe we could have an Augustinus Vox show with robots, but that's another topic. From there, we move into a very different kind of album. So Augustine's in this period before baptism, from about maybe January to Easter, you know, and he's at Ambrose's church, and he has some notes that he says in his work. I think the Confessions, where he talks about the singing and the impact it had on him personally. And so I wanted to bring out the hymns of Ambrose from the church, or Ambrosian hymns, because they're not all directly from Ambrose. But um, we really made in this album a rock album, like a worship rock album. So that's what this one is particularly. Spent a lot of time with this one. Really, really enjoyed it. Really showed me, I think, the another aside on the AI topic, AI music topic, that you can have Christian worship music that's AI generated, and it can be good. You know, it's you got this silly notion right now that somehow you got to have a person playing an instrument to make it really real worship music, whereas like I don't know, the, the those worship discussions have happened so many times in Christian history. There was a time when they thought drums were bad. There was a time when they thought guitars were bad. Now they're saying AI music's bad. So, it's just kind of the same thing, and we like to do that because maybe we're bored. I don't know, but you got a human on one end, Ambrose, or people like Ambrose who wrote hymns. You got a human on the other end listening to it, me, and I experienced worship through this album. I don't have a problem saying that. So, you can check it out and see if you have the same experience. But it's a great album. It's got some good lyrics. I think they're very instructive for Christian faith. And we got one song on there that's just really a true, almost like a rock instrumental, kind of an intermission in the center. So you'll kind of get some of the worship songs, and then you'll get this like one that's more of a like a rock anthem, and then it's great. Just check it out. So from there we move into an album about the instruction that Augustine is receiving uh, during this time in Milan before his baptism. And there's also instruction that takes place after the baptism. That's why this is called Volume 1, Ambrosian Catechesis. Catechesis is a word that means instruction, an ancient word that means instruction. So wanted to capture that ancient feel, add a little bit of rock vibes to the cover. I love the way this looks. And it's the way of preparation for baptism. It had a baptism had a very different meaning during that time. So I don't know what perspective you come from. I'm from a Protestant evangelical perspective, and we have a very different understanding of baptism. But that's part of the joy of interacting with these ancient writers and their thinking is learning their perspective and kind of experiencing uh, their teaching. Their sermons were very different than our sermons. I mean, gosh, um, you know, uh, I think we talk about Hexameron. Two of the songs come from Ambrose's Hexameron series, 6 Days of Creation. Those sermons were like an hour long. Can you imagine? Like, I think most of us can only put up with a sermon for like 20 to 40 minutes, but you got like a sermon that's like over an hour long. It's just you know, it's a different time, different place. And so you can learn a little bit about some of the ancient practices and the instruction from this album, pulled from a lot of different sources. Then we go to our most recent album, just released. Hope you check it out. This is Augustinus Vox on music. Okay, so this is Augustine's work on music. So he actually began to write this work during his time in Milan. He tells us. Don't know exactly when he finished it, sometime in the future, but it's actually a technical, more of an educational work that's kind of this dialogue between a teacher and a student, and they're talking about rhythm and measure and meter and poem and music, and how there's like these patterns, and how do we identify those aspects. I think for those of you who might be more trained in music or art in a more formal sense, and you have a lot of categories you work with when you're thinking about those kinds of topics. Um, some of this will resonate with you, I think. For someone like me who's less trained in those things, but I have my own areas where I geek out and technical information, so I can appreciate it. But ultimately, it's kind of saying that there's you got this rhythm, and then where does the rhythm, it's got all these measurements, and it's sort of like on order. It kind of echoes on order, and you got like, where does this come from? Who's the originator of all these patterns? How is it that we can actually appreciate music? And, of course, because there is a music maker, there is a pattern maker, there is a rhythm maker in the universe, and this person has this being, God has essentially, we are kind of a part of that work, that artistic work that God has done, and that art points us to God. It's a great album, and there's an especially great song called Eternal Harmony I really like, and so check it out. And hope you enjoyed this. We are uh, just at 30 minutes. I think this is going to be the one that I publish. So thank you for listening to this very long uh, journey through the Augustinus Vox music up to the present day. And in the future, you know, we got some more things planned. Let's see, we have another instrumental album that I'm working on specifically about the baptism, the night of the baptism, and then also Ambrosian Catechesis Volume 2, the instruction that happens after the baptism. And from there, we'll actually journey away from Milan to uh, Rome and Ostia, um, and exploring other topics. So, hope you appreciated this. Hope this is helpful to you as just some background in the journey. And yeah, just reach out as always if you got any questions or want to chat about any of this. So, thank you.